Everglades ecosystem. I'm collaborating with an undergraduate student at Larrabee, and our thesis advisor is Dr. Robert McCleary of the Department of Wildlife, Ecology, and Conservation at UF. We're also collaborating with Bob Reed and Kristen Hart of the USGS. So we are assisted in this project with the help of the USGS and many of the other organizations down here in South Florida who have graciously supported us with letting us look at their fishes around the rabbits and also climbing. So today I'm just going to give you a quick background on the problem with the invasive pythons, our project goals, the study that we've designed, our very, very preliminary findings, and our future. I need something.
What's on the timer?
Yeah. But anyway, I'm sure a lot of you are very aware of this problem, but anybody that's been hiding under a rock, I'm just going to go over the history really quickly. Burmese pythons are a large constrictor snake native to Southeast Asia. They started showing up in the Everglades in the 80s, but those were just one or two isolated incidents. And in the early 2000s, they started to, observations started to dramatically increase. Here's these kind of scary graph of the exponential increase, and they've been confirmed as breeding inside the park. We found nests and gravid females. And there's an estimated between 5,000 and 100,000 snakes in the population. As you guys can see, that's a huge confidence interval, and that's just kind of a test to how difficult it is to detect and find these animals and take the population. But the best guesstimate is in the tens of thousands of snakes, but no one is really sure. So while we've been seeing a proliferation in python observations, we've also been seeing a correlating decline in mammal observations. Last year, Dorcas et al. With 14 other people published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences this study that was looking at historic road count data for mammals and comparing it to road count data from the late 2000s. And as you can see, they found a dramatic decline in all species of mammals. There's a 99% decline in raccoon observations, a 98% decline in possum observations, and they failed to detect marsh rabbits entirely in Everglades National Park. So the popular kind of theory as to what has caused this decline is those increasing pythons. But the data is purely correlative at this moment, and there leaves a lot of questions. There are other things that might possibly correlate, like changing water regimes, fire. So that's what we're looking at now, is we want to move from correlation to causation. So we're looking at marsh rabbits as a way to look at these mammal declines. So why marsh rabbits, other than the fact that they're adorable? It's because they were once common in Everglades. If you look at the early 90s road count data, they were very numerous. Historical records from back in the 50s, animal observation cards, they used to be there, and they're not there now. And rabbits are a keystone species, they're important prey base. So they're also numerous outside of Everglades and outside of areas that are invaded with pythons. And we also know that pythons eat them because most of the pythons that are captured are meat crop seed. And rabbits are right up there with cotton mice, with one of the most common things that these snakes are eating. So our hypothesis is that pythons are causing marsh rabbit declines. And we expect to see this played out in the fact that our radio-collared rabbits will experience python predation. They'll show reduced rates of survival. And there will also be a reduction in their spatial occurrence that is correlated with python spatial occurrence. So how we're going to do that? We've kind of got a two-pronged study. We're going to do a radio telemetry study and an occupancy model. We're going to evaluate cause-specific mortality and survival in areas with and without pythons. And we're also going to map the entire southern South Florida ecosystem in order to see how rabbit occupancy correlates with python occupancy. So our occupancy model will be looking at what influences the occurrence of rabbits. We're going to perform pellet counts throughout the system, so here in Big Cypress, in the park, in Fakahatchee, in the STAs, and start looking at what's really pushing these animals around. Is it water? Is it vegetation? Is it the snakes? This image is kind of the best data that we have of just python occurrence. There's a hot spot down in the Everglades near Homestead, and they've kind of radiated out. So we're going to try to map it on top of that. The other part of the study is our translocation and radio telemetry study. So usually when you have a declining animal population, what you want to do is just catch a couple and throw radio collars on them and see what happens. Unfortunately, in the Everglades, there's not a self-sustaining population of marsh rabbits. That was found in road count data, and when we also went in and did pellet count surveys, we found no pellets where historical records of rabbits had occurred. So what we had to do is we had to go find some. We captured rabbits from north of I-75 in the STAs and in the wildlife management areas and brought them to the Everglades. We're also working in Fakahatchee, where we radio collared 20 animals that are control non-translocated population. We brought 20 to the Everglades and another 10 to Waxahachie National Wildlife Refuge to act as a control for the natural differences in survival that are inherent in a translocation, because that just adds a lot more stress on the animals. So there's 2 spots in the Everglades that we release these guys. Okay, so now we're getting into our very preliminary data. These animals have only been in the system for a couple months. I think our first release was September 22nd. So there's Ed, the other grad student, doing a pellet count survey in a very flooded area of Taylor Slough. There were no rabbits there. They do float. Yes, they do float.
Even fresh?
Good. But they're hard to count when they float. Who knows? This is our preliminary movement data from the Coastal Prairie Trail, which is near Flamingo, down in the park. For those who aren't, okay. For those of you guys that aren't familiar, the Flamingo area is the site of the initial python kind of radiation, and that's where we put 10 of our rabbits. So this is just their kind of preliminary movement. The stars are the release sites. The skull and crossbones are where they ended up dying. So as is typical with relocation, there's a lot of interesting movements that are not typical of rabbits. Usually rabbits stay within a 2-hectare area. But you see this rabbit, for example, was released here, he moved up there, and he ended up dying over here. It is actually an avian mortality, so Bergman just brought it there. We've had 2 python mortalities at this site. They're not on this because they happened actually in the last week. But that white rabbit and the red rabbit both were eaten by different pythons.
Are the radio collars destroyed at that time, or do they stay in the python?
We can track it to the python. We don't know how long it can be in the animal before it will stop transmitting. I know that they've had the Key Largo wood rats. They had a python eat one of their wood rats, and I think it was in there for almost 2 weeks, I think. We don't really know. We're also going to be, if it's possible, we're going to capture the pythons and implant transmitters in them so that you can take them back out at the end of the study. So, National Wildlife Refuge. We've been releasing them on the east side of the L40 levee. There's my tech releasing one of our rabbits. This is a site that has a healthy marsh rabbit population and very few snakes, so it's a control site. So right now, Loxahatchee has really high water, and so the animals are pretty much just up on the levees. We've had 3 alligator morts here because the animals are also up on floating vegetation. So Fakahatchee Strand is my site, and this is where we're looking at the 20 kind of natural, healthy rabbits. Fakahatchee should have a fairly low density of pythons. So that's what we're looking at. I've captured 16 rabbits as of this morning, and that's kind of their more natural movement. The stars are where I trap them, and they usually stick pretty close to where I got them. This morning, actually, as of 3 a.m., 4 of those rabbits hopped across the road because that used to be flooded, and now it's a lot drier. When I first scouted that, there were no rabbits on the north side of the road. So for the preliminary mortality data in Loxahatchee, we've had an avian mortality, we've had bobcat mortality, we've had 3 get eaten by alligators, and 1 we just found a radio collar and we have no idea what happened to it. In Everglades, we've had 6 avian mortalities, 2 python mortalities, and 2 unknowns. And then again at Fakahatchee, where I've been trapping for a month, we've had no mortalities, which is what we would have expected considering our hypothesis that the animals in the Everglades would experience higher mortalities due to the increased predation pressure, and also in Loxahatchee that would have been expected because of the inherent stress with the translocated. So the next step in our project is to continue monitoring survival. We're going to translocate another batch of 10 animals into the park to replace the ones that have been predated. We're going to monitor these animals for reproduction and recruitment to see if the reintroduction has been successful. We're also going to perform vegetation assessments to investigate multi-scale habitat selection and use in order to better understand what factors are influencing the animals and how maybe the system could be better managed. And then we're going to move on to our habitat occupancy modeling to look at bigger mammal diversity issues. That's all. Thank you.